Hello everyone. Welcome to spooky time. Whoa. Now imagine there's like, hold on. Oh no. Really light? So that was the flicker. This is the best I had. This is the history of the Grim Reaper and deities of death around the world. Don't watch if you're gonna die sometime, because you won't like it. So video.
There are few figures as recognizable as the Grim Reaper.
I cut my finger at work. What? You can't see it well. There it goes. I cut it. It hurts. So if you hear, it's me just wrapping it a little bit. I'll try to mute it. Sorry. Back to the video. Maybe not.
When it comes to the idea of death. But where did this skeletal figure shrouded in dark robes carrying a scythe even come from? Why is this the image so many of us associate with death? What better way to find out than by examining the history of the Grim Reaper and the many deities of death from all around the world? Today's video has been made
This is a new channel, by the way. Sorry, I want to give them a shout out. This is Mythology and Fiction. I don't remember. That's what I was just doing. So back to the video. Sorry, I just wanted to give them a quick shout out because it's a new channel. And we're gonna go ahead and skip over this. By the way, I'll be breaking this video
by Wondrium
at the 18-minute mark, just so we're all.
For those who have been around, you will know that I've been using or just some mind-blowing facts. Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. The show is a fascinating watch for anyone with an interest in history or ancient Rome. If you'd like to try Wondrium, however, it was very common in numerous parts of the world for death to also be personified as a woman. In Spanish, Italian, and French-speaking countries, it's not uncommon to see literature and art depicting these reapers as female. The images themselves vary wildly from beautiful and ugly to young and old. In England and Germany, during the Middle Ages, death was personified as an animated skeleton with a scythe, which would collect the souls of the dying and those who had already passed. In Poland, death is also a skeletal figure, however it takes the form of a female, and so instead of the black robes we associate with the Grim Reaper, death here is an elderly woman in white robes. The term Grim Reaper first appeared in English in 1847 in the book titled The Circle of Human Life, which was translated from the previous German version by August Tholuck, otherwise known as the Tunes of Christian Devotion. We know the Grim Reaper is just one of the many personifications of death, but how did his image become so recognizable? For that we have to go back to the 14th century, when 1/3 of Europe's population and a 10th of the global population had fallen victim to the plague, an epidemic many consider to be one of the worst we've ever seen. With so much death and medicine being nowhere near as advanced as it is today, it's no surprise there needed to be some kind of representation of what was happening. An image that was easily recognizable, that offered some kind of explanation or solace, regardless of whether it was true or not. The image chosen was the Grim Reaper. We can take a look at the different aspects and what exactly they may represent. The skeleton is symbolic of death, or at least the natural cycle. When we die and eventually decay, the bones still remain. the remnants of what was once a living being. The dark robes were symbolic of the funeral process, more specifically the robes worn by religious figures who conduct funeral services. So of all the weapons and tools available, why does the Grim Reaper carry a scythe? The scythe is a tool used for agriculture, often to cut down grass or grain. The term reap refers to cutting or harvesting a crop. This is usually done in the fall and is symbolic of the end or the death of another year. The Grim Reaper is a harvester of souls, taking them from the end of their natural life to the afterlife, thus the connection to the scythe. With this creation of the Grim Reaper, you may be forgiven for thinking this was some kind of evil or malevolent figure that came with a bunch of negative connotations. However, that wasn't really the case, nor the...
I believe the Grim Reaper is also the angel of death, right? So it's supposed to be a good thing. Well, I mean, not a good thing, it's still death, but, you know, it morphed into, I believe.
The intention. The image was there as a symbol and to offer comfort at a time where death was rampant and explanations as to why were very limited. Death is a natural process, and it has been personified by every culture for thousands of years. In order for us to understand the Grim Reaper, or the purpose of giving death a face, we should at least take a look at the images that came before. In Greek mythology, there are several deities and spirits associated with the concept of death, but one that we can relate back to the Grim Reaper is Thanatos, the personification of natural and gentle death. A child of the goddess Nyx, Thanatos appears in a few stories, but you'll find him more commonly mentioned in passing rather than elaborated upon in any real detail. As a winged figure in dark robes who can also be seen carrying a scythe or sickle, it is possible Thanatos may have provided some inspiration for the Grim Reaper's appearance. Hades by now I'm sure many of us are familiar with as the king of the underworld. Hermes on the other hand is not often regarded as a deity of death, but he did perform several roles relating to the underworld. Being able to traverse so quickly naturally made him the perfect messenger between the realm of the living and the dead. He would also help in guiding souls to the underworld. Married to Hades, Persephone became a deity associated to the underworld and death. Before she was a deity of spring and nature, her return from the underworld every year during the spring is seen as a sign of immortality. The transition into Queen of the Underworld made her a deity similar to Hades, where people refused to use her name in fear that it would invoke ill fortune. Hecate was the patron goddess of many things, and some of these included boundaries and crossroads, which led to the idea that she was able to unlock the gates that separated the two different realms. And so, like Hermes, she assumes the role of ensuring the dead are able to travel from one to the other. As a gift for siding with the Olympians during the Titanomachy, Zeus gave Hecate the Lampides. These were torch-bearing nymphs who travel with Hecate to and from the two different realms, ensuring the path was well lit and unobstructed. We also can't forget individuals such as Charon the ferryman, who carries these souls to the realm of the dead, Cerberus, who guards the gates of the underworld ensuring that no one leaves without permission, the Keres, spirits of violent death, and the Erinyes, spirits of vengeance. In Norse mythology you have Hel, Loki.
There's a lot of people involved.
His daughter, who reigns over the parts of the underworld known as Hell or Helheim. Some of her depictions include a two-toned face. half white and half black or blue. Sometimes the other half is made up of exposed bone and decaying flesh. The two sides of her face are symbolic of life and death. Remaining in the Norse realm, you also have the Valkyries, female winged figures who help guide the fallen soldiers to the afterlife. However, they do not take them to Hell's Domain, they go to Valhalla or Folkvanir. Sometimes the Valkyries have wings and other times they do not. Sometimes they ride horses, and other times they use horns full of mead to make sure the fallen soldiers follow them. Because if the allure of a mysterious winged woman telling you that the afterlife is just around the corner wasn't enough, then surely some alcohol would seal the deal. Odin himself also has ties to death, as he oversees those in Valhalla, taking half of those who died in battle and making sure that they are prepared for Ragnarok. Norse mythology, as with many others, divides those who die into certain categories, and in charge of each one are different gods and spirits. We know half of those who died in battle are taken by Odin to Valhalla, the other half are taken by Freyja to Folkvanir. The details and purpose of this realm are fairly unclear, however it seems many agree Folkvanir was the alternative realm to Valhalla, serving a similar function and ruled over by Freyja. The biggest difference I came across was the suggestion that Odin and Freyja preferred certain types of warrior, which is why they were hand-selected instead of just randomly sending half to Valhalla and the rest to Folkvanir. Freyja herself is the goddess of fertility, love, beauty, gold, and even war, which in turn leads to death. It also explains why you have depictions and stories of Freyja that describe her as this radiant beauty, but there are also stories of her taking the form of a battle-hardened Valkyrie when it comes to choosing the fallen. Neither one of those depictions is wrong, they simply reflect the different aspects of a multifaceted goddess. Those who died at sea would be collected by the god.
She seems to have a lot of responsibilities.
Goddess Ran. Ran and her husband were the personifications of the sea, with their 9 daughters being its waves. Those who are unfortunate enough to die at sea would be collected by Ran in her giant net. However, some sources suggest that this may not have necessarily been an act of kindness. The Old Norse for Ran roughly translates to mean theft, robbery, or to plunder, and thus we have the idea that Ran's actions were far more malicious. She would drown those at sea, and using her net, she would collect their souls from the bottom of the ocean. Heading over to
Seems like a bit of a rude thing to do.
Norway, we have what was known as Pesta, the Plague Hag. The Plague Hag was the personification of the Black Death in Norway. This elderly woman wears a black hood and a dark red skirt. With her she carries a rake. Wherever she goes, pestilence follows. The stories state that she travels the countryside going from farm to farm spreading disease. If you came across Pesta in your village carrying her rake, that was a sign some would survive. However, if she was sweeping away with her broom, unfortunately that meant your entire village was doomed. One of the ways Pesta would travel was by boat. Many saw this as symbolic of how the plague was spread and how the outbreak made its way to Norway in the first place, through rat-infested ships and boats. Pesta is one of the closest comparisons we have to the Grim Reaper in terms of purpose and time period. Celtic and Irish mythology have several deities and spirits associated with death. One of the most well-known being the Morrigan. The Morrigan is primarily associated with war and fate. This branches into predicting the outcome of a battle, whether it's victory or impending doom and death. As a goddess of battle, the Morrigan sometimes takes the form of a crow. Other times she can be seen before the battle washing blood-stained clothing. Those who see her know that they have been fated to die. There are also times where she appears to strike fear into the troops of her enemies, and to embolden and inspire her own. There is the idea that the Morrigan took pleasure in the misfortune of fallen soldiers, and given the violent nature of those dying, many suggest that the Morrigan inspired the concept of the Banshee, which came much later. She also has ties to the Austrian winter spirit Perchta, as well as Morgan Le Fay, who is a fairly important character in Arthurian lore. Described as the wife of the Dagda, the primary deity or king within Irish and Celtic mythology, the Morrigan herself played a fairly important role. On occasion, she can also take the form of a triple goddess, appearing as 3 sisters. However, these depictions are not very common.
I just want to say before we move on, I was asked to be in this video, and they had painted me, and I wondered why they were making me stand so weird. I mean, obviously I have more abs than that, you know, but my better flowing hair. But yeah, I just, you know, yeah, I was in the video. Yep. On to the Grim Reaper.
Ankou is a figure that appears in various parts of Britain, but is most common in Ireland and Wales. Sometimes he appears as nothing more than a shadow, and other times he is much closer to the Grim Reaper. A skeleton in black robes, wearing a large hat that conceals most of his face, and wielding a scythe. He drives a large coach driven by black horses and accompanied by spectral companions. His primary role was to collect the souls of those who had passed on, in the hopes that one day his debt would be paid and he would be allowed entry into the afterlife. His origins can differ wildly. One story depicts him as a prince who came across death during a hunting trip. He challenged Death to see who could kill a stag first. Death was victorious, and with Ankou being a cruel prince feared by the people, he cursed him to roam the earth as a ghoul for eternity. In another telling, this was then expanded to describe Ankou as a servant of Death, charged with watching over and protecting graveyards, collecting spirits who were lost and guiding them. In this telling, Ankou became more of a title or duty. Each parish had what they called their own Ankou. The last person of the year to die assumed the role of Ankou for their parish, until the next year where a new person would be selected. Some variations state that it was actually the first person to die who was selected. The strangest of these origins depicts Ankou as the first child of Adam and Eve. Manon or Manannan MacLear, also known as the Son of the Sea, was the king of what was known as the Otherworld in Irish mythology. Part of the Tuatha De Danann, Manon was the guardian of the Otherworld. Part of the Tuatha De Danann, Manon was the guardian of the Otherworld, which in Irish mythology was a supernatural realm belonging to the gods as well as the dead. The Otherworld is cloaked in mist and is invisible to all humans. Manon rides a self-navigating boat and was in charge of assigning plots of land in the Otherworld to the remaining members of the Tuatha De Danann. The Americas are...
I'm going to go ahead and stop it here. And we will jump back into the... Some of it's interesting. I didn't know a lot of these. So, I'm hoping you like it. Otherwise, if you don't, the Grim Reaper is going to come visit you. So you should like and subscribe, or that won't happen. Or it will. Have a good day, have a good night.